I will tell you what all participants in World War II kept silent about, but we will reveal the secrets. World War II was fought not only on the battlefields, but also on the airwaves, on the pages of letters, and in the silence of occupied cities. It was a war of intellect, where a word delivered at the right time was more valuable than a shell. Messages on which the fate of armies depended were hidden in music, in laundry hanging on a clothesline, and in the ordinary mutterings of soldiers. In this confrontation, wit became the main weapon, and ingenuity made it possible to circumvent even the most vigilant censorship. It was a silent battle for information waged by spies, partisans, and ordinary soldiers. Watch the video to the end to find out how an ordinary knitting needle in the hands of a housewife could coordinate an entire sabotage operation. What if I told you that everything you believed about spy radio broadcasts was wrong? We are used to thinking of coded messages as a complex set of numbers or Morse code transmitted in the silence of the night. However, the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, turned its regular music and news programs into a powerful tool for communicating with the French resistance. Instead of complex codes, they used personal messages that sounded like complete nonsense to the uninitiated. It was a system that was ingenious in its simplicity and worked in plain sight. To the German occupation authorities and censors, these broadcasts were just a stream of ordinary information and music. However, for resistance fighters listening to their radios in basements and attics, certain phrases were orders to act. The message, "Jean has a long mustache," could mean the start of an operation to blow up a bridge. The phrase, "tomorrow will be windy," served as a signal to prepare for the reception of a parachute drop. The system required careful advance coordination between London and local resistance groups. Each group had its own set of code phrases and knew when to listen to the broadcast. BBC announcers read these messages in a flat, impassive voice, mixing them with real family announcements or excerpts from poetry. This made interception and decryption virtually impossible without knowledge of the specific key. The difficulty for the enemy was that these phrases had no logical connection between them. It was not a code that could be broken, but a pre-agreed dictionary of signals. German radio interception services could record tons of these broadcasts, but they couldn't understand which of the thousands of absurd phrases was a signal and which was just an absurd phrase. It was a perfect example of asymmetric information warfare.
Funkstille bis morgen früh. Ende.
One of the most famous examples of such a message was the transmission of an excerpt from a poem by Paul Verlaine. The first line, "The autumn sigh of a languid violin," was a signal to all resistance groups that the Allied landings would begin within the next 48 hours. This poetic line, broadcast over the airwaves, launched the largest amphibious operation in human history. There were no limits to ingenuity when it came to transmitting information. This was just one of many methods devised in quiet offices and on the front lines. We would be very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about this method of using public radio stations? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of field mail. Every soldier who sent a letter home knew that his message would be read by a military censor. Every word was carefully checked for the disclosure of military secrets, troop deployments, or simply defeatist sentiments. Under these conditions, it seemed impossible to convey truly important information. However, the solution to this problem had been known to mankind for centuries, and it could be found in any kitchen. We are talking about invisible ink, the simplest and most accessible version of which was ordinary lemon juice. When applied to paper, the acid it contained was completely invisible. A soldier could write a normal, harmless letter and then add a secret message between the lines or in the margins using lemon juice and a pen or even a sharpened match. The paper looked clean, and the censor, seeing nothing suspicious, let the letter pass. The process of revealing such a message was as simple as writing it. The recipient only had to carefully heat the paper over a candle flame or a hot light bulb. The organic substances in lemon juice oxidized from the heat and darkened faster than the paper itself. Brownish letters appeared on the sheet, revealing what had been hidden from prying eyes. In addition to lemon juice, soldiers and agents used many other organic liquids at hand. Milk, vinegar, urine, or even a solution of sugar and water worked on the same principle. Anything that contained carbon and could char when heated before the paper was suitable for secret correspondence. It was the cheapest and most accessible means of communication. Of course, counterintelligence and censorship services quickly figured out this trick. They knew about these methods and selectively subjected letters to heat treatment. This led to the next round of the arms race. Special services, such as the British Special Operations Executive or the Soviet NKVD, began to develop more sophisticated chemical sympathetic inks. This new ink was two-component. Written with one chemical composition, it remained invisible when heated. A special reagent, another chemical, was required to reveal it. The recipient of the letter had to wipe the sheet with a sponge dipped in the developer to make the secret message visible. But what if ink wasn't needed at all? Because the language itself was a code that no one could crack. In the next chapter, we'll reveal the truth about the people whose voices were the most closely guarded secret of the U.S. military. What I am about to reveal has been classified for decades. While German engineers were building their sophisticated Enigma encryption machine, the U.S. military found a completely non-technological but ingenious solution. They turned to the indigenous people of America, the Navajo Indians. Their language was so complex, archaic, and isolated that virtually no one outside the tribe knew it. It was the perfect, living code that was impossible to crack. The idea of using Native American languages had emerged during World War I, but it was perfected during World War II. The U.S. Marine Corps recruited a group of several hundred young Navajo Indians. These people, known as Navajo codebreakers, or wind talkers, became America's secret weapon in the Pacific theater of war. The uniqueness of the Navajo language lay in its tonal structure and complex grammar. The same words spoken with different intonations could have completely different meanings. To someone who did not speak it from birth, the language sounded like an incomprehensible set of clicking and guttural sounds. Japanese cryptographers who easily cracked many American codes were completely powerless against it. But the code breakers went even further. They didn't just speak their native language, they developed a special code within the language itself. For military terms that did not exist in the Navajo lexicon, they came up with figurative substitutes. For example, tank became turtle, fighter plane became hummingbird, and battleship became whale. The process of transmitting a message looked like a normal conversation between two radio operators. One Navajo codebreaker dictated the message to his comrade on the other end of the line. They transmitted hundreds of orders, reports on enemy deployments, and data for artillery right in the heat of battle. The speed was incredible. What would take hours for a cipher machine, the Navajo could transmit and decode in minutes. If you enjoyed this incredible story, please like this video. Are you ready to learn the truth about what was hidden behind ordinary village life? In occupied European countries, especially France and Holland, the resistance waged a silent war right under the noses of the patrols. When radio transmitters were too dangerous and written messages could be intercepted, the simplest and most inconspicuous signals were used. An ordinary clothesline became a bulletin board for the partisans. Agents and couriers used prearranged visual codes. For example, a specific item of clothing hung on the line on a certain day could serve as a signal. A red skirt could mean danger, patrol in the village. Two blue shirts hung side by side signaled safe passage or ready to meet. This system was ingenious in its simplicity because it was part of everyday life. The occupying forces saw women hanging laundry every day. They could not have suspected that this routine household chore was actually an act of transmitting information. A glance at the right yard was enough for a resistance observer to understand the situation. The codes could be even more complex. The order in which items were hung, the number of clothespins, or the way a towel was attached could all have a specific meaning. The sheet is folded in half meant, "I'm waiting for the shipment," while the pillowcase is hanging to the left of the sheet meant the operation is canceled. There were endless possibilities. In addition to laundry, other household signals were also widely used. The position of window shutters was a classic method of communication. Fully open shutters could mean all clear, half-closed shutters could mean wait, and fully closed shutters during the day could mean failure or ambush. An agent on his way to a meeting could assess the situation from a distance and turn back in time. Farmers used their own methods. Logs stacked in a certain way by the woodshed or a bucket left in the wrong position by the well served as signals to their own people. Even a flower pot placed in a certain window was part of this secret language. It was a form of communication that was completely integrated into the surrounding landscape. The chalk that every schoolchild carried in their pocket also became a tool for espionage. Members of the resistance left coded signs on the walls of houses, fences, or telegraph poles. A simple line, cross, or wavy line drawn in an agreed-upon place conveyed short messages. I was here, information received, meeting postponed. All these methods were part of a vast, invisible web of resistance that enveloped occupied Europe. It consisted of thousands of such small details invisible to the enemy. What other everyday objects do you think could have been used as signals? In the next chapter, we will learn how an ordinary soldier's letter was turned into a complex code. Not all hidden messages required chemicals or radio waves. Sometimes the secret was hidden in plain sight, in the ordinary text of a letter that a soldier sent home. Censors carefully read every word, looking for military secrets, but they were not always prepared for literary tricks. One such trick was the acrostic, a cipher familiar to poets since ancient times. The principle of an acrostic is simple. The first letters of each line or each word form a meaningful message. A soldier could write a completely innocent letter about the weather, food, and his thoughts about home. However, if you read only the first letters of each line, you would get, for example, "We are being transferred to Minsk," or "We need ammunition urgently." This method required a certain literary talent from the sender. The text had to be composed in such a way that it looked natural and did not arouse suspicion. Each line had to logically begin with the right letter, while maintaining the overall meaning of the narrative. It was a real cryptographic puzzle that soldiers solved in the trenches by the light of a smoky lamp. The recipient, usually a family member, had to know about this method in advance. For them, the letter was not just a message from the front, but a document that had to be carefully studied. After reading the message using the first letters, they could learn things that would never have been written openly. This information could be important for relatives or, in some cases, for underground cells behind enemy lines. More complex variants were also used. For example, the message could be composed not of the first letters, but of the last letters of the lines, or the second letters of each word. The key to the cipher was agreed upon in advance, before being sent to the front, during a short leave, or in previous, still unencrypted letters. Are you ready for the shocking truth about spy technology? While soldiers and partisans relied on simple tricks, German intelligence services perfected microphotography technology. They invented the microdot, a method that allowed an entire page of text to be reduced to the size of a regular printed dot. This technology seemed like something out of science fiction and gave agents a huge advantage. The process of creating a microdot was the pinnacle of optical engineering at the time. First, a secret document, a drawing, a list of agents, or a detailed report, was photographed onto special film. Then the resulting negative was reduced in several stages using a complex system of lenses. The final result was tiny, less than a millimeter in diameter. This dot was then carefully pasted into the text of a normal, meaningless letter. It could be disguised as a period at the end of a sentence, above the letter I, or simply placed in a blank space. It was completely invisible to the naked eye. The letter could pass any inspection, and no one would notice the huge amount of information hidden in it. To read such a message, the recipient needed a special microscope. An agent in a safe place had to find this tiny dot, extract it, and place it under the lens. Only then could he access the secret data. It was a technology ahead of its time. FBI Director Edgar Hoover called the microdot a masterpiece of enemy espionage. When the Allies first encountered this technology, they were amazed. It allowed entire archives of data to be transmitted through the regular postal service, right under the nose of counterintelligence. It was the perfect container for information. The hunt for microdots became a new headache for security services. Censors and investigators began to treat every letter coming from neutral countries with suspicion. They examined documents under magnifying glasses and microscopes, trying to find these treacherous dots. It was painstaking and exhausting work. This technology became the direct ancestor of modern data storage methods. The idea of compressing information to microscopic sizes, conceived by German engineers, formed the basis of microfilming and ultimately digital media. How much do you think this technology influenced post-war development? In the next chapter, we will talk about a cipher that is impossible to crack in principle. Has there ever been a cipher in the history of cryptography that is impossible to crack? Yes, and it was actively used during World War II. We are talking about cipher notebooks, or one-time pads. When used correctly, this system provides absolute mathematical resistance. No computing power, either then or now, is sufficient to decrypt it without the key. The principle behind the one-time pad is ingenious in its simplicity. It is based on the use of a random key that is the same length as the message itself. This key is a long sequence of random letters or numbers written down in a notebook. The sender and recipient must have two identical copies of this notebook. The encryption process was simple but labor-intensive. To encrypt a message, the sender took the first letter of their text and the first letter of the key from the notebook. Then they added them together using a simple mathematical operation, e.g. modular addition. The result was the first letter of the ciphertext. They did this for each letter of the message, using the next letter of the key. The most important rule of the system was that each page of the notebook, i.e., each key, was used only once. After encrypting and sending the message, the sender destroyed the used page. The recipient, having received the ciphertext, performed the reverse operation, subtracting the same key from the ciphertext, and obtained the original message. After that, he also destroyed his page of the notebook. The absolute security of this method was achieved by following three rules. First, the key must be completely random. Second, the key must be equal to or longer than the message. And third, most importantly, the key must never be reused. If these three rules are followed, cracking the code becomes mathematically impossible. Why is this cipher unbreakable? Because any decryption will be equally probable. For example, the intercepted ciphertext ABC can be decrypted as WWII with one key and as sun with another key. A cryptanalyst has no way of knowing which decryption is correct. When a soldier or partisan was captured, he was deprived of all means of communication. He found himself in a cell, cut off from the outside world and from his comrades. However, even in these seemingly hopeless conditions, human ingenuity found a way out. Prisoners developed an entire system of communication known as prison tapping, or tap code. This system allowed them to communicate with comrades in neighboring cells using only the walls or heating pipes. The basis of the code was the so-called Polybian square table. It was a simple 5x5 grid in which the letters of the alphabet were entered. Since there were more than 25 letters, some of them had to be combined, for example, I and J. Each letter in this table was assigned coordinates, a row number and a column number. For example, the letter A was in the first row and first column, and its code was 11. The letter B was 12, C was 13, and so on. The letter Z could have the code 55. Prisoners had to memorize this table. The transmission process was simple. To transmit the letter A, the prisoner knocked once, paused, and then knocked once more. For the letter B, one knock, pause, two knocks. The knock indicating the row number was usually separated from the knock indicating the column by a longer pause. It was a slow but reliable way to transmit information. The sound of the knocks carried well through the concrete walls and metal pipes. A neighbor in the cell opposite or next door would press their ear to the wall and listen carefully, translating the series of knocks back into letters and words. In this way, it was possible to convey entire sentences and even hold conversations. This prison telegraph was vital. It allowed prisoners to coordinate their actions, for example, to agree on identical testimony during interrogations. They could share news with each other that they had heard from guards or during walks. This helped to keep up morale and let them know that they were not alone. Not all communication was aimed at transmitting specific orders. Psychological warfare and maintaining morale in the occupied territories were of enormous importance. And here, the BBC once again rose to the occasion, launching one of the most successful information campaigns of the war, the V for Victory campaign. It all started in 1941 with an idea from Belgian émigré Victor de la Valette. He suggested using the letter V as a symbol of resistance. V was the first letter of the French word victoire, meaning victory, and the Flemish word vrijheid, meaning freedom. This symbol was understood by millions of people in occupied Europe. The BBC picked up on this idea and began to actively promote it in its broadcasts. They called on people in occupied countries to paint the letter V wherever possible, on walls, on posters, on German equipment. It was a simple but incredibly powerful act of defiance. It showed both the occupiers and themselves that the resistance was alive. But the real genius of the campaign was the use of sound. BBC staff noticed that the rhythm of the letter V in Morse code, 3 dots and a dash, coincided with the opening motif of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. This famous, formidable motif, sha-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, became the audio signature for all BBC broadcasts addressed to Europe. This move was brilliant for several reasons. First, Beethoven was a German composer, and Nazi propaganda actively used his music. The BBC effectively stole one of their main cultural symbols and turned it against them. It was a sophisticated act of cultural sabotage. Second, this sound was everywhere. It could not be banned. People could whistle it on the street, tap it on the table, or honk it with a car horn. This simple rhythm became a secret password that united millions of strangers in a single impulse. We have talked a lot about sophisticated spy technology and centralized campaigns, but ingenuity was also evident at the lowest soldier level. Frontline fighters and partisans in the forests came up with their own simple and effective ways of communicating, using whatever was at hand. Sometimes these methods were no less ingenious than the developments of the secret services. For example, partisan units often used so-called knot letters. This ancient communication system was ideal for forest conditions. A courier traveling to another unit carried a regular rope with him. The number of knots, their shape, and the distance between them constituted a coded message. Such a letter was impossible to detect during a superficial search. It was just a rope. Even if a patrol found it, they were unlikely to understand its true purpose. Only the recipient, who knew the key to the cipher, could read the message by feeling the knots. It was simple, reliable, and completely silent. Another ingenious method that, according to legend, was used by resistance fighters was coded knitting. Women sitting on benches knitting socks or sweaters could actually be transmitting secret messages. They used combinations of knit and purl stitches to encode letters or signals. The knitted fabric became a carrier of information. A certain pattern could mean, "The patrol has passed," or "A truck is approaching." This method was almost impossible to decipher. To an outside observer, it was just a woman doing needlework. A resistance agent only had to glance at her work to get the information he needed. Soldiers on the front lines used their own system of signals. A simple tap with a rifle butt on the parapet of a trench could have dozens of meanings. 1 tap meant attention, 2 meant enemy, and 3 meant fire. These simple acoustic signals allowed them to coordinate their actions in battle without shouting, which could give away their position. We have looked at just a few of the countless ways in which people exchanged information during World War II. From poetic lines on the radio and lemon juice to complex microdots and the ancient Navajo language, each method was a response to the challenges of the time. These stories show that war is not only the roar of guns, but also the quiet whisper of intelligence. It was this ingenuity, born of harsh conditions, that often determined the outcome of battles. The ability to convey an order, warn of danger, or simply maintain morale was no less important than bravery on the battlefield. It was a war in which not only the strongest won, but also the most cunning. Which of these secret communication methods did you find most ingenious? Was it the high-tech microdot, the Navajo cultural code, or the simple but effective clothesline? Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the military tricks of the past.